Hello there guys, gals, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Laperladen, and video game betas suck.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
No, I'm not talking about those dudes with a nerd neck, no jawline, and a dented head kind of betas. I mean these kind of betas. Betas or early access period for games these days are a reprehensible excuse of what they used to be. To really explain what I mean though, I've got to rewind the clock a bit. You see, back in my day, I can't do that. You see, back in my day, betas for video games was something that actually helped to influence the development of that game. Surprise, surprise, an example of a game series that did this well were Bungie's Halo games. Starting with Halo 3, Bungie ran a beta in May of 2007, a whole 4 months before Halo 3 would eventually release on September 25th. This public beta not only served to hype up the highly anticipated release of Halo 3 even more, but gave the community a chance to provide feedback for the game and spark plenty of conversations online, especially on Bungie.net. I won't go through all the changes between beta and full release, as Vengeful Vadim does a far better job than I ever could, but there are plenty of visual differences, fixes to the sound design, balancing of weapons and equipment that happened as a result of this beta. Halo Reach also had a beta that was accessible if you purchased a copy of Halo 3 ODST, and this was arguably even more helpful for the finished game than Halo 3's, once again becoming publicly playable in May of 2010, 4 months before its September release date. Big changes to the behavior of weapons like recoil and bloom, the ammo capacity of those weapons, plenty of visual changes, the balancing of certain armor abilities like armor lock, game modes. The list is quite thorough, and for all their shortcomings, even 343 Industries were kind enough to give us a beta for Halo 5 9 months before the game released in October of 2015 that focused primarily on 4v4 multiplayer, which a lot of people would argue is Halo 5's strongest suit. Not me though. Halo 5. All my homies hate Halo 5. Though in recent years you'd be hard-pressed to find a game, especially something from the AAA scene, that have their public betas release even 2 months before the game is set to release. The FPS genre is probably the worst when it comes to this. Looking at you, Battlefield 2042.
This is the worst!
However, no franchise is more guilty of this practice than Call of Duty. Black Ops 3 was the first game in recent memory from Call of Duty to have a beta that ran from August 19th of 2015 and then concluded on the 30th, with the full game releasing several months later on November 6. Since then, the time between the release of the beta and the release of the full game has grown shorter and shorter, with the quality of the games coincidentally decreasing as well. Infinite Warfare ran its beta from October 14th to the 24th, and the game released less than a month later on November 4th. Modern Warfare 2019 ran its beta from September 12th, first on PS4, and concluded on the 23rd. Modern Warfare 2, no, not that one, and no, not that one either, there's too many Modern Warfare 2s, is once again starting with PlayStation 4 and 5 from the 16th to the 20th of September, and then opens it up to Xbox and PC from the 22nd to the 26th. Which has got to be one of the closest times that COD has ever cut it when it comes to the timing of their betas and full release of the game. Modern Warfare 2 releases on October 28th. That is barely even a month for the developers to actually take the feedback from the community on board, listen to the content creators, etc., whatever technical bugs and glitches are present or any networking errors, weapon and equipment balancing issues, map layout concerns, all of that, and actually have the time to act on it. It also doesn't help that Modern Warfare 2 is historically one of the Call of Duty games that we've seen the least amount of multiplayer gameplay for so far. This is an issue for a few reasons, the first of which is crunch. Those poor fucking devs, man, God help them. The amount of pressure that they would be feeling to make changes to the game would be immense. The community expectations to change this or nerf that, add cover here or buff this weapon here, improve the optimization, would feel insurmountable. And no doubt there would also be pressure from higher ups to make those changes. Development crunch is one of those things that in most cases just can't be avoided when it comes to making games, but that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be steps taken to try and avoid it where possible, and in my opinion, one of the best ways to do that would be to release your game's beta earlier, so the developers have a longer amount of time to respond to community feedback and act upon it when necessary. By having more time available and less deadline pressure, there's less of a chance that people will make mistakes as they're not feeling as rushed, and if they do make mistakes, weeks, there's more time to fix them. Surely, if you were in the shoes of a publisher, that would be something worth considering. Not only would the game release in a better state, which would positively affect player retention, but it would also mean that your development studios and their staff aren't completely burnt out by the time the game releases, because they haven't been crunching on changing things due to the feedback from the beta only coming out like 20 days ago. Also, less of a chance of developers leaving if they're not forced to sleep under their desk and work 100-hour weeks. To me, it also feels like an easy way to stage an excuse. By having your game's beta that close to release, the old "don't expect too much to change between now and the full game" gets thrown around a lot, especially by those white knighting for a multi-billion-dollar company and their product. You know, I'm sure Activision really appreciates your service and your loyalty, Steve, in defending their product. I bet one day they're gonna hire you to be their community manager or some shit.
You fucking idiot.
Furthermore, in Call of Duty's case especially, by having the betas segmented with PlayStation getting access first and then Xbox and PC, they're just shooting themselves in the foot. This archaic console exclusivity garbage that the rest of the industry has long since moved past is just going to mean that they have less time to get feedback from people on Xbox and PC and narrow down how to fix any major issues on those platforms. This is especially an issue with MW2 being on 2 generations of console and on 6 different platforms. As each console has different specs, different hardware, different ins and outs, sometimes fixes have to be tailored and more specific and can't be rolled out across the board for every platform at risk of messing up something on a different console. Unfortunately, betas now, especially for AAA games, aren't really betas anymore. They're just another glorified marketing tactic that sucks people in by temporarily offering players a highly polished slice of this product for free for a few days, only giving them just enough time coincidentally to play the game and not for long enough to form a proper opinion or begin to criticize some of the game's shortcomings, unless you're someone who's well versed with that particular series or genre. Oh, and of course, no evidence of microtransactions and how those work. They're saving those for the full game. Do not question, just consume product and buy when the full game comes out, with the promise of more content that wasn't accessible during the beta, hopefully being enough to entice those who are on the fence. I'm not saying that betas, tech previews, or public playtesting periods for games are going to turn a turd into a work of art. No, if your game is rotten to the core and garbage like Battlefield 2042, then yeah, absolutely no amount of beta testing and community feedback is going to help a game like that, at least not in the short term. Halo Infinite, despite its numerous tech previews and flights, still couldn't save that game from collapsing down a deep, dark pit of despair and taking the entire community with it. Though to be fair, there are issues in the full version of Infinite that weren't in the flights. It raises the question though of how effective betas actually are in some circumstances. Does the game already have to be great, like Halo 3 and Reach, for a beta to even mean anything? Like adding that extra glacé cherry on top of the chocolate fudge sundae, as opposed to the steaming turd? Is it dependent on the developers and how responsive they are to community feedback? I'd argue that after its beta, and seeing the massive negative response to BF 2042, DICE and EA could have bit the bullet and said, alright, the game is about as enjoyable as putting your balls in Tabasco sauce, let's delay it for another year, instead of barely even a month. You can see how the developers maybe could have taken a more proactive response to the feedback they got from the beta and taken more time to refine the game further. I think this is a big reason for why we are often seeing games release that feel so unpolished at launch, because those extra few months or weeks that come from having a beta or some kind of early access period prematurely in development means that there is more time to fix things. There is more time to make a better finished product and more variance in the sample size of testers that you have available. A group of playtesters, and I'm not trying to undermine their importance in the video game development cycle, they are immensely underrated, but a group of playtesters sitting in an office all running the same or similar hardware on a wired connection is obviously going to be completely different to someone on the other side of the world running the game on a Soviet-era alarm clock and stealing the McDonald's Wi-Fi from down the street. And less of a chance for what should have been time before launch to implement changes now happening after launch to pick up the pieces, which is never a good look. Betas helped to better the relationship and lines of communication between the players and the developers, and something that felt like a declaration of trust, handing over this game that is unfinished, not done, rough around the edges, and in its current state, maybe isn't something that the developers are entirely proud of. It's nerve-wracking knowing whether or not people will like it and seeing the response and what people have to say. But regardless, it's something that in many cases needs to be done to improve the game, making it a better experience for everyone who plays it, and opens the door to new opinions that the devs otherwise might not have thought of. It's giving the players a seat at the table to present ideas and address issues that internally might not have come up. Whereas now, especially when it comes to Battlefield, Call of Duty, and even Halo to an extent, because it feels like we're still stuck in a beta, betas just feel like a cheap marketing stunt. Nothing changes between the beta and the full release, and everyone is worse off because of it. What's something that you dislike about the gaming industry in its current state? When was the last time you played a beta for a game and felt like there were actual improvements to the finished game? Let me know in the comment section down below. This was my first attempt at trying to make a video that branches out a little bit and discusses some things that aren't completely tied to Halo, and hopefully you all enjoyed it. I'll be throwing in some more general gaming opinion videos in the future, especially if this one does well. So if you like what you see, there is such a thing as a like button. You could click that, and you see that little red button there that says subscribe? Yeah? Click that. Trust me, you will not regret it. You wouldn't. You're way scared.